Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network, and presented in partnership with TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on October 10th, 2021, and is current through the Star Trek Lower Decks episode, Wet Dooge, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a 40-minute news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are multiple television shows in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone, and my guest this week is returning guest Patrick Escudero. Patrick, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
Hi, Alex. Thank you for having me. It is always an honor.
All right, Patrick, well, you know the drill. I want to know something that's got you excited about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
Well, this one was easy. This latest episode of Lower Decks, and I won't kill the Klingon translation, but 3 ships.
Yes, sir.
Is probably what I would call, and I don't know what feedback I'll get from this, a perfect episode of Star Trek. It just started out with this trope of, oh, it's a day off for the crew. We're going to see some of that TNG style hobby stuff that they did, like, going on the holodeck for some Shakespeare or, playing the trombone. But then it shifts and we get to see a little bit of the lower decks for the other, for the Vulcan and the Klingon ships. And you go, oh, that's cool. That's interesting. And there's some fun, gags in there. And then it shifts again, and we learn about the Paquette storyline even more and how it all ties together. And then at the end, you have this brilliant space battle. It gave me chills, and I will admit that I teared up. I wrote about this online, and that kind of blew up a little bit on Twitter, but it was amazing. I just couldn't believe, as they kept pivoting from like one bit to another, just A, how well it fit together once you got to the end, and then B, just how beautifully written it was overall. And then, of course, that gag at the end during the credits was just perfection. Lower deck. I want to be a lower decker on a Borg ship because it looks kind of easy. So yeah, that's what has me moving at Warp 10. That was just an amazing episode, and I can't wait to see the finale next week.
Man, I am so with you. The back half of Star Trek Lower Deck Season 2 has been really terrific, and this episode, I think, is a standout highlight, though I will say not my favorite episode I've seen of Star Trek Lower Decks, but tune in, I guess, next week for my opinion about what was my favorite Lower Decks episode of the season. But yeah, this one was really, 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 really good. I loved the way that it sort of lulled you into a false sense of what the episode was by, kicking off with, oh, it's a R&R episode for the crew, right? It's a low stakes comedy episode. And then we switch to these other ships, and it's like, okay, there's not much going on the Cerritos, so let's go and find out what's going on these other ships. But then the way at the end is sort of like, bang, hits you right back into the Paquette storyline, follows up on comments that Riker had made in that second episode about Starfleet intelligence believing that the Paquettes were getting outside support from somewhere, finding out that it's a rogue Klingon captain. How deliciously Next Generation is Perfect. That, and then hitting us with a really great space battle. Another one of these, lower decks kind of classic Star Trek space battles that ended up being really good. And the animation was great, and the jokes were great, and those shots of when the ship goes to red alert, everybody kind of leaving their TNG appropriate hobbies, right? You've got a guy dressed as Peter Pan who's clearly on the holodeck. Ensign Barnes is wearing a snowsuit because she was clearly, skiing on the holodeck. You got a guy wearing a smoking jacket, those ridiculous gym outfits that Troy and Crusher wore in the Next Generation. Just like everybody drops everything and gets to their stations wearing these ridiculous outfits. I thought that was so great. And yeah, this episode really was a real standout highlight. Probably, I think, one of the best episodes of Star Trek there's been. I mean, I'm not just going to say going all the way back to 2017 with the start of this sort of era of Star Trek, but this is one of the best episodes we've gotten in a long, long time.
Yeah, I agree. I won't just go back and say it's the best since this new era of Trek. I think it's one of the best that we've seen. And I think as the years go on, we're going to hear more and more people say that about this episode, in my opinion. It just, everything worked perfectly together. I felt like there was just enough nostalgia and references, but it didn't overwhelm the episode. Like it still kind of held its own. So yeah, just a great episode. And you're teasing me for next week. So now I'm sitting here going, man, just a little bit, Alex, just a little bit.
All right. Well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
Star Trek Prodigy and Star Trek Discovery both had panels at New York Comic Con this weekend, but let's start with the Star Trek Prodigy panel that just wrapped. We're recording not 30 minutes after the end of the panel because it had the biggest news of the weekend. Fans in the room were treated to the world premiere of the series' two-part pilot, Lost and Found, and fans worldwide got our first clip of Kate Mulgrew in action on Star Trek Prodigy.
I'm Catherine Janeway, your training advisor. I'm a hologram based on one of the most decorated captains in Starfleet history, programmed to assist the Protostar's crew on their journey back to Federation space.
Ugh, she's hideous. Why is her forehead so smooth? Ugh.
You're no summer peach either, Tellarite.
Ha 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 ha! Jacob Pog likes her.
What's a Fredder? Federation?
What Starfleet crew doesn't know the Federation? Where's your captain?
Right here. I am the captain. And I order you to return us to Tars
Well,
Labora.
forgive her. She's delirious. Her brain's sick with space flu. I'm in command of this ship.
Quite a vote of confidence. I'm only here to offer advice and maintain the Protostar's lower-level functions. Everything else is up to your crew. But I believe there is something you aren't being truthful about.
And if that wasn't enough yet, if you weren't in the room, you didn't get the chance to see the first two episodes, I'm as jealous as everybody else. If you were in the room, I'd love to know what you thought. But if that wasn't enough, we also got some new casting news out of the panel, which confirmed what Robert Beltran, yes, that's Chakotay himself, told us at Star Trek Las Vegas this past August, which is that, yes, it is now confirmed he does, in fact, have a role in the show. Alongside Captain Chakotay, yes, you heard that right, Captain Chakotay, Jason Alexander is returning to Star Trek after his guest starring role in the Voyager episode Think Tank. So he's playing a different character this time, thank God. He's playing Dr. Noon, who is a Tellarite. Daveed Diggs, who is my favorite member of the original cast of Hamilton, will voice Commander Tyses, an Andorian. And Jamila Jamil, best known for her role in The Good Place, will be voicing Trill Ensign Ascensia. That is a star-packed lineup and seems to confirm that Starfleet will have some role in the show, in addition to the holographic Janeway. Star Trek Prodigy will premiere in the US and Canada in a few short weeks on October the 28th. Still expecting that premiere date will probably be at some point in early 2022 in the rest of the world, particularly in Europe, as Paramount Plus is expected to roll out early next year in those areas, and we think Prodigy will be on that service. Patrick, how does today's news have you feeling?
Really good. I was already excited for Prodigy, as you probably know. I have a nephew that's already a Trekkie and a niece that's younger, only 7, that I'm hoping to kind of introduce to Star Trek via this, besides what she's already gleaned from her brother. The Robert Beltran news, I wasn't too much of a surprise, though I guess I was a little bit surprised they confirmed it rather than letting it be kind of at least a bit of a surprise while you're watching the show at some point. And wow, what a heck of a guest cast list that they added on here. I'm not too familiar with Daveed Diggs. I did know about his role in Hamilton, but Jamil from The Good Place, and she's also, I believe, going to be in the Marvel She-Hulk series coming up.
Yep.
And then, of course, Jason Alexander, one of the biggest celebrity Trekkies that I think we all know of. It's great to see him back in the franchise.
Yeah, at some point during Lower Deck Season 2, I think this is maybe after the episode that Richard Kind guest starred in, I think I tweeted something about how it was like the current Star Trek franchise was sort of, going around and finding beloved genre actors and beloved actors of the day and finding roles for them in the Star Trek franchise. And like Star Trek Prodigy is definitely leaning into that too, right? I mean, those are 3 very big names in the kind of acting world today, either from a genre perspective or, in the case of Jason Alexander, from just a global phenomenon perspective, his role on Seinfeld. Hamilton, obviously, massive smash hit. I thought Daveed Diggs was the best thing about that show from the original cast. Jamila Jamil, hugely popular role on The Good Place. And yeah, so terrific that, this show has added some really big names. hopefully, again, being one of those kind of entrees to, hey, if you're a Jamila Jamil fan, but you haven't necessarily seen much Star Trek, or you're a Jason Alexander fan and you haven't seen much Star Trek, maybe you're going to check out Star Trek Prodigy, and that'll suck you into the rest of Star Trek as a result. So very, very cool. And also cool, with a lot of these legacy cast announcements, they seem to have decided there is more value in telling fans about them up front as a way of growing excitement than there is kind of holding them for reveal within the show. But yeah, great to see that, Robert Beltran was, I mean, he didn't really talk about it in much detail, but that he was sort of telling the truth when he was at Star Trek Las Vegas and said he was working on Prodigy. Cool that that's kind of out there and confirmed now. Excited to kind of see what role Captain Chakotay is going to play in these other characters. And I think this is going to be really great. I'm really looking forward to it. And we're only now 18 days away from the premiere of Star Trek Prodigy, which is really, really exciting.
And they didn't say if Captain Chakotay was going to be a hologram or something else. So are we going to actually see some real Starfleet non-holographic members here from this guest cast? And it kind of sounds like that based on, we've got a doctor, a commander, an ensign, and then Captain Chakotay. Could these be potentially crew members on Voyager back in the Alpha Quadrant? I don't know. But I think it also speaks to the popularity of the franchise, especially now that you have such big names that are interested in being a part of it. It's one thing to ask them, it's one thing to pay them the money, but they have to want to do it. So to see such like big names of the day, it's great. I love seeing it, and I hope we continue to see it. And I really have a lot of excitement for this series, especially when it comes to introducing, as they said in the panel, new fans to the series, not just kids, but just people that maybe were a little bit hesitant to get into Star Trek, maybe didn't know anything about it, overwhelmed by the fact there were so many series and so many episodes. I hope this is a gateway for a lot of people, not just the younger audience.
And this was obviously an audience that was kind of set up to, they made the effort to go to New York Comic Con in the middle of the global pandemic, get into this Prodigy panel. So if there was any crowd that would have been primed towards loving what they saw when that premiere was played, this was probably it. But I will say, I mean, obviously neither you nor I saw it because we're not in New York, and you could only see the episodes if you were sitting in the room, but the crowd had a really great energy coming out of those two episodes. And so it felt to me like they were well received in the room, which, as I say, maybe doesn't mean all that much, because if any room is set up to receive it well, it's going to be a New York Comic Con panel room full of Star Trek fans. But that does just ever so slightly inch up again my excitement. And the panel just wrapped at 2:00. It's now 2:45. So I haven't seen on Twitter reactions from too many people who are in the room. I've seen a couple who said they really, really liked it. So it'll be really exciting as some more of those reactions start to roll in from people who are in the room about what they thought of it, to hear what they thought of the pilot for Prodigy and kind of go from there. And, we obviously got that clip, which we just played of Janeway, which sounds like it's not in episode 1 or 2. Maybe that's like right at the beginning of episode 3. So yeah, tons and tons and tons to look forward to here.
Yeah. And I think both you and I know one or two people that were in the room. So I'm interested in hearing those reactions from folks. It did sound like there was a lot of good energy coming out of it when Don Lewis came on to do the introduction for the panel. And then that Janeway clip, which I wasn't sure we were going to get because in the live stream, they paused it again and didn't show it to us. But then I had hopped on Twitter and it was there, and I watched it. I loved that Janeway kind of introduction where she insulted the Tellarite. I love that line because it's one of those, it's a funny little insult, but if you're already a Trekkie, you're gonna kind of get the reference of Tellarites liking to argue and insult each other. So I'm really, really excited if you haven't been able to tell about this series. And I'm a little I'm nervous and excited because it's a departure. It's something new. It's on Nickelodeon. It could flop potentially. I'm nervous about that because it's something different and directly aimed at children. But at the same time, just everything that's come out so far and that we've seen and heard, and the energy from the people that were in that room from the panel, I think it's going to be a success, and I'm really, really hoping it will be.
100%. We are all rooting for it. Well, Star Trek Prodigy wasn't the only show with goodies to share at New York Comic Con this year. The cast and crew of Star Trek Discovery also made an appearance and unveiled new key art and a new full-length trailer for Season 4 of the show, which premieres only 3 weeks after Star Trek Prodigy on November the 18th. The key art shows Captain Michael Burnham in the new vibrant Command Red uniforms of this season, standing behind the Discovery's captain's chair with her hand resting on its seat back. back. The poster is very cool and appears to evoke some of the themes that have been discussed for this season as Burnham finally takes command. And let's also give a listen to that trailer.
Once we enter the anomaly, we are going where no one has gone before.
Life is just a blink. It is one heartbeat in the entire lifespan of the universe.
Captain? Captain? Are you with us?
Today, we seek to understand a threat like none our galaxy has faced before.
What exactly is this anomaly?
We're not certain. Our ship was hit by something.
Together, we will meet this threat to our shared galaxy.
Until we understand the anomaly well enough to predict its path, billions more lives will be at risk.
Not on our watch.
Leadership is about balance. Your acts of bravery are huge swings of the pendulum. And there is a very fine line between a pendulum and a wrecking ball.
It'll be bumpy. We could be destroyed.
We're totally gonna ignore that warning, aren't we?
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I've lived a good life.
Jump. With so much at stake, countless lives, futures. Once we enter the anomaly, we are going where no one has gone before. Wherever we come from, whatever our experiences,
You got this.
we're all in this together.
I gotta have hope that we'll find a way to stop it.
We cannot let fear define us in this moment. The future remains uncertain. But the captain in me knows anything is possible.
Ready when you are, Captain.
Let's fly.
Lots of small and interesting snippets for the season here, including Saru back in a Starfleet captain's uniform, a meeting between the Federation president and the president of Nivar, the seeming return of the Kowat Malat, Owo being a complete badass, and a tiny bit more information on this season's big threat. The new Federation president is played by Chella Horsdal, who you may know from previous appearances in shows like Man in the High Castle and Hell on Wheels, and Discovery showrunner Michelle Paradise did confirm that this Federation president has human, Cardassian, and Bajoran heritage. And the other surprise from the trailer, a look at what very much appears to be a 32nd century Ferengi Starfleet captain. The makeup for the race looks to have been somewhat redesigned, echoing a little more closely the original concept art for the race developed by Andy Probert in the early days of Star Trek The Next Generation. And whether people like it or not is currently the big topic of discussion online. Hoping some of the Prodigy news today will sort of sweep away a little bit of the Ferengi discourse, because it has already gotten tiresome and it's only 24 hours later. Patrick, does the new trailer have you excited for the release of Star Trek Discovery Season 4 next month?
Well, I was excited without the new trailer, but yeah, I'm even more excited now. I knew the minute that Ferengi flashed on screen, I was like, oh no, oh Twitter, why? I could, it's like I could hear Twitter in my ear at the same time that I was watching that. Just, it was a flash in the pan shot of this captain. And I mentioned this on Twitter. I wasn't so concerned with the look of the Ferengi, but having a Ferengi Starfleet captain and also having the USS Nog mentioned in season 3, well, not mentioned, but seen at least. I would love to get a Nog shout out this season where if the Ferengi is a character that we get to at least hear speak or whatever, there's some sort of, Nog was the first Starfleet officer from the Ferengi and he was our inspiration to, move beyond profit or something like that. I'm hoping for that. It's the first thing I thought outside of the redesign. And the trailer itself, I found myself wondering, what was that artificial reality wall, or augmented reality rather, excuse me, and what wasn't? What was a practical shot?
Yeah.
What was I seeing was really AR wall heavy, and I couldn't tell from the trailer. Now, a lot of it was really quick shots and quick cuts, so it'll remain to be seen how I feel when I actually see the show, but I'm pretty excited to see that in action with the VFX. And also, we saw a little bit of David Cronenberg back again, so I was excited about that. I liked his appearances. He had a lot of of really fun dialogue with Hugh Colbert, and I'm excited to see how much he's in the show, whether it's a lot or a little, and how much he plays into the story this season.
Yeah, I am really loving a lot of the quick looks we got. Here's the funny thing about the Ferengi, right? Like, as far as we know, that quick shot that's in the trailer, that might be all we see of the Ferengi captain in season 4 of Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, I'm flashing back to the season 3 trailers, which had a Cardassian and a Lurian, and everybody fixated on that, and it became a whole thing. Those were better received, I think, by a lot of fans because the designs were much closer to the original than this Ferengi was. But then it's not like we really saw any of the Cardassians or the Lurians in the season. I mean, you could probably add up the appearances of both of those two races to maybe 15 to 20 seconds worth of screen time in the whole season, and not a single line among them. So, you know, that might be the case for this Ferengi thing too, which is why I think I said on Twitter, I'm not totally sold on the Ferengi makeup design yet. I think I obviously totally understand it's not going to end up looking identical to the way that it looked before. I think there are certain features that I really liked about the makeup design that have not made it into this new one, which I think is a bit of a shame. But having said that, I'm open to changing my mind because I've only seen it for, 0.56 of a second in one frame of one trailer. And 2, it probably is not going to matter that much because my guess is this character's maybe not going to have all of that big of a role in the season. And, it's sort of just going to be a bit like, it's going to be a big scene with lots of captains and they get in some briefing and one of them happens to be a Ferengi. So I think there's going to be a lot more other really interesting things to talk about in Star Trek Discovery Season 4 than what the Ferengi looks like. But hey, that's what the internet has decided to focus on today, which is okay.
It does feel like a bit of a tease by the people that created the trailer, the people behind Discovery, because they know what we're going to do. They know what's going to happen on Shrek Twitter. And honestly, that probably leads to more views and more clicks of the trailer. And that's a good thing for the marketing, making us get all up in arms about a slightly different looking Ferengi character. But yeah, you just reminded me of the fact that like the Cardassian and the Ilorian didn't look that much different, but also showed up like for a hot minute and that was it, really. So yeah, now I'm thinking, wow, I guess maybe this is probably just a tease to get us talking, and we'll see the captain in that group of captains and maybe another small shot here or there. But yeah, I don't know, it got people talking. I hope we move past it, like you said. Let's just all watch that Janeway hologram video now and talk about that instead. It had its 15 minutes. Let's be over with it.
And we didn't really learn anything else about season 4 of Discovery. I mean, that cast is very buttoned up in terms of, not telling us anything about the season to come. And I mean, as I said up top, it feels like from that trailer, we got a little more context about what this season's going to be and what's it going to be about, but not a ton. So I think there's, and hey, we're just a little over a month at this point away from the premiere of season 4 of Discovery, so like we don't have long to wait. But at this point it doesn't feel like we have all that much more to discuss, and partially I think that's maybe why the internet is fixated on this Ferengi thing, is because some of the more important story beats or ideas or concepts or things that we'll maybe see in this season of Discovery are still very much under wraps, which they just seem to be very buttoned up about it and don't want to, outside of what's in the trailer or outside of what's in the official press release, there's not been that much kind of sort of talking or hinting or even foreshadowing what's to come. So my guess is that's partially why we end up in this situation where we're fixated on how the Ferengis look. But that's fine because it's only 38 days until the premiere.
Yeah, and I probably came away with more questions from the new shots in the trailer. There was a lot where I'm like, whoa, why are the Kiwat Malat there? Assuming that's them, what's going on with that? There's a lot going on that made me go, oh, I definitely don't know anything about this season, do I?
Right.
So we'll see. I was also happy to see Jet Reno back.
Yep, looking great in that yellow uniform.
Yeah, I know Tig said she's not really doing as much Star Trek, I guess, which I believe is her choice more than the cast or whatever. But I hope she's in at least a few episodes and we get to see Jet making those wisecracks with Stamets.
Yes, she said that they had asked her to come up and film twice this season, but she had ultimately only felt comfortable going up for one visit. to film some Discovery season 4 because of the pandemic. So if to any extent she is in it less this season, that's the reason why.
Yeah, and kudos to her for making decisions to keep herself safe and whatnot. No problems with that from me.
Well, despite being off last week when we otherwise would have talked about it, I am not going to pass up the chance to discuss the return of Jeffrey Combs to the Star Trek franchise in Where Pleasant Fountains Lie, which broadcast pretty much right after I recorded the previous episode that we just did. Combs was interviewed after the episode by multiple outlets about his return to the Star Trek franchise, voicing the villainous computer, Lord Agamus, and I wanted to highlight in particular the interview conducted by James Whitbrook at IO9 with the longtime Star Trek guest star. Asked about his general reaction to returning to Star Trek, Combs said, "Well, it's always nice to be asked to do something, to be invited to do something. I didn't know much about Lower Decks, except that it was being appreciated by fans. And anytime I hear the word Star Trek, I know I'm in good hands. So I didn't hesitate long to say yes. It's a little difficult these days to be part of some of the other non-camera iterations that are airing or streaming now, simply because, well, they're Canadian productions, and that kind of hinders us poor American actors to a degree. So I was thrilled, I liked the script a lot, and I'm really happy with how it turned out." And asked about what kept drawing him back to Star Trek, Combs had this to say. "From the get-go, it was about a point of view. Star Trek was about doing, yes, it's an adventure, yes, it's swashbuckling, yes, it's meeting aliens from other planets, but more than that, it is a commodification, an example of how good we can be and how together we can solve problems. That humanity is not lost, that there is a moral code that human beings should live by, basic tenets, and we don't always live up to them. Most of the time we don't live up to them, but the ideas of we don't interfere with somebody else, we try to find a peaceful solution to things, we try to befriend each other, to create a bond, that has been a through line throughout Star Trek from the beginning. And it resonated in the 60s, and I think it's still resonating today. And I think that's why these new iterations of Star Trek are still being watched, because people are still searching for what is noble, what is good, how can I be my best?" Patrick, did you enjoy Jeffrey Combs' guest starring role as Lord Agamus on Lower Decks?
Oh, absolutely. He was obviously having a lot of fun with it. And he mentioned that in this interview where he talks about it being a different tone and refreshing compared to some of the other characters that he's played in live action. And he was wonderful in that part. It was great to see a legacy actor come back in a role, but also be a little bit different than maybe some of his other parts, playing a bit of a villain. Well, not a bit of a villain, a big villain in Wayun, and then playing kind of the rough and gruff Shran on Enterprise, which is my favorite Jeffrey Combs character. Just having him do comedy and really leaning into it, and I really enjoyed it. And it was I wasn't sure how much he was going to be in the episode when I first we first heard he was coming back. I'm like, oh, is it going to be like a short side story that it isn't, maybe we only see him a little bit, but he actually had a lot of lines, because some of the other guests that we've had Legacy Trek, they haven't had a lot of lines so far, with the exception of maybe Riker. So it was nice that he had so much work to do in the episode itself, and really played into it.
Yeah, that's an awesome point, which is that it's been great having all the other legacy actors who've appeared in the show. John Delancey, Jonathan Frakes, Marina Sirtis, Robert Duncan McNeil, J.G. Hertzler was in an episode. But Jeffrey Combs actually, I think, had the biggest role of any of those returning guest actors, even Jonathan Frakes, who was in a couple of episodes of Lower Decks. I think if you added up all of his lines, they probably still don't get to the level of Jeffrey Combs in this one episode, where it felt like he had a really meaty, substantive role. It wasn't the J.G. Hertzler who had 2 lines in one episode of season 1 of Lower Decks, right? This was a key character in a key episode who was a key antagonist for these characters. And I thought that was really, great and really well done. And Combs did a great job with it. It was terrific that they asked him to do it. That's something that came out of this interview. He did an audition for it. They came to him and said, "Hey, Jeffrey Combs, we have a part that we think you'd be right for on Lower Decks. Is that something you want to do?" And he jumped at the chance. And let's hope that the reaction to his appearance on Lower Decks, which was massively, overwhelmingly positive from the fan community, and the amount of press that it got, right? This interview on IO9, there were interviews all over, not just your kind of Star Trek fan sites. There was one on Trek Movie and a few other places, but some of these more kind of general genre sites as well that kind of latched on to the idea of how cool is it that Jeffrey Combs is back in Star Trek. Hopefully that's something that the creatives of some of these other shows will see and pay attention to, and maybe start thinking about, okay, well, we'd have to fly him from LA to Toronto in order to film, in a Strange New Worlds or in a Discovery or in whatever comes next. But, he's a very popular actor amongst the fan base. And so let's give them what they want.
I absolutely agree. And I would love to see him play anything really in Strange New Worlds. The amount of press that it got from the non-Trek sites was actually kind of surprising to me, just as it was the amount that he had to do in the episode. I kind of was going into it thinking, okay, I've seen other guest stars on Lower Decks. They have some lines. It's funny. It's entertaining. We get to see a legacy character, but it's not going to be a lot. And that's what I think subconsciously, that's how I was approaching the episode, thinking, oh, he's going to be in there for like a few minutes and it'll be really cool. And then that'll be it. But yeah, it was a huge role, a big part of the episode and the overall story of the episode. And I hope it kind of, if it didn't already open the eyes of the people working on Trek, that a lot of people really want to see Jeffrey Combs more often, I hope this has done that.
And I think it's a terrific example of the power of fandom, right? In the sense that I think there's always this open question of, well, I'm on Twitter or I'm on Facebook and, I'm sort of sharing my opinion and sharing what I'd like to see about Star Trek. How much of that is listened to? How much is that paid attention to? I'm going to guess that if there wasn't this massive fan swell, anytime there's any hint that Jeffrey Combs may or may not have something to do with Star Trek, that it wouldn't have happened. And that it's entirely because of that level of love for the actor, and that we have been asking for it and petitioning for it. I'm thinking back to the cast Jeffrey Combs as Dr. Boyce in Strange New Worlds campaign from a few months ago. But if it weren't for all of that kind of effort on the fans' behalf, that none of this would have really happened. And so I think that's definitely something to keep in mind, which is that the message that I pick up from this is that the creators behind these shows are listening to what fans want. They're not necessarily always going to give fans what they want, but hey, it never hurts to ask, and B, it's definitely like the more that the Star Trek franchise in this iteration continues to develop, the more I see places where it is clear that the franchise creatives are listening to some extent to what fans want. And that's really great because hopefully it portends more in the future. So basically, that's a long way of saying, Deep Space Nine fans, keep up your calls for more Deep Space Nine related stuff in the current Star Trek franchise. Because hey, we got Jeffrey Combs into an episode of Lower Deck, so let's see what we can do for Deep Space Nine next.
Yeah, and for all the negative stories you hear about fandom and social media and just general Twitter terribleness, it's nice to see that there is a positive side to it. And I'm glad they don't give us everything we want, but like you said, it never hurts to ask. So, hey, please bring us some more Jeffrey Combs. We will love you for it.
Well, and lastly, this week, Titan magazines are relaunching their long-running Star Trek magazine as Star Trek Explorer. And while the newly redesigned magazine will still include the in-depth interviews and features that it's been known for, Star Trek Explorer will also feature new short fiction stories set in the Star Trek universe. Accompanying the first issue of Star Trek Explorer will be 4 stories that focus on the character of Q, 2 in the print publication and 2 in the digital supplemental available to subscribers. Star Trek novelists Una McCormack and James Swallow, Star Trek Voyager story editor Lisa Klink, and Doctor Who audio drama author Chris Cooper all contributed to the first issue. And at New York Comic Con this weekend, it was revealed that the stories will give Q encounters with Kirk, Archer, and Picard. So really looking forward to these. Patrick, do you have any interest in the Star Trek Explorer magazine?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the reboot of the magazine, or relaunch it rather. Now, it's funny, you and I talked about this on Twitter a while ago. I actually gifted a subscription to my nephew for his birthday way back in May, not knowing, and I don't think anybody knew at the time, that they were going to do a relaunch. So he's actually never received an issue yet. So his first issue is going to actually be this relaunch. And I believe he'll get the first 4 issues of the relaunch. So I'm pretty excited for that, because it seems more like moving away from the smaller magazine format to being more long form, since they're only doing for a year. And the fact that they're adding some fiction to it, and the authors they have lined up for this are, pretty impressive. Una McCormack has written some of my favorite Star Trek novels. Same with James Swallow. I don't know as much about Lisa Klink or Chris Cooper, but they have impressive resumes from what I've read. So that plus the fact that we're getting Q in Picard season 2 and we're going to get some Picard or some Q stories prior to that. I'm interested in if any of them will, hint at anything in Picard season 2. I know stories and novels are not really canon, but I'm interested in that. And just overall, I'm looking forward to kind of this expanded version of the magazine.
Yeah, I'm a massive Star Trek fiction fan, so this is great news. I know that Titan had done something similar for a while now with their Star Wars magazine. They've included short fiction, and I know that's very popular, and it gets republished in kind of compilation books that get put out. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. I really like, some of these authors, and terrific that Lisa Klink, who wrote a number of Voyager episodes, is now writing short fiction for Star Trek. I think that's really terrific. Maybe, hopefully, Pocketbooks can convince her to do a novel sometime soon. But yeah, this is gonna be great. I'm looking forward to it, and can't wait to dive in for some Q action in the first issue of Star Trek Explorer. All right, well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, I and my guest give you a wish or theory we're nurturing about any of the shows or the future of the franchise. So Patrick, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
So my wish / prediction, not really far reaching, but for the Lower Decks finale, I really feel like we're going to get a big name guest star. Not sure if it's going to be like the Jeffrey Combs level of, lines that the person will have. But I was actually thinking with the Klingon storyline from last week and how they kind of retreated back to the homeworld, are we going to see maybe a Chancellor Martok, make an appearance if the Paquette storyline continues and the crew of that Klingon ship have to kind of answer for what their captain was doing with the Packlids? I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that. I would love to see that. And then, of course, there's always the possibility of a Riker / Titan appearance, which now would be really fun to have some sort of gag involving Bradward Boimler and William Boimler.
As I alluded to up top, I may have already seen the finale, so I'm not going to comment on the theory just in case I accidentally spoil something to somebody. But I think it's a great theory, and you're only a few days away from finding out the answer to that question.
I felt bad because at the top of the episode when you mentioned that, I'm like, oh, he's not going to be able to say anything about my prediction.
I will just say I think people are going to like it a lot. And awesome. That the high that you felt after this week's episode will extend to next Thursday as well, into the finale of season 2 and out the other side into season 3, because it's really, really good.
Oh, that's great. It's great to hear. Not that I wasn't expecting it, but you and I seem to have the same opinion on a lot of things when it comes to Star Trek. So now I'm like, is it Thursday yet?
All right, so let me give you my theory, which is I've not seen any of Prodigy. So this is my completely, and this is probably one of the last chance I'll get to do this, which is kind of give my thoughts about what Prodigy is going to be, especially after today's news about Chakotay and these other Starfleet characters. So Patrick, you had asked this question of, do we think okay, we know Janeway's a hologram. Is Chakotay going to be a hologram too? Are these other characters going to be holograms? And I think the answer is no. I think so. We know these are recurring characters, so I think they'll show up in maybe 2, maybe 3 episodes throughout the season. So my guess is that the overarching plot for Prodigy season 1 is that the Protostar is an experimental slipstream vessel that was lost in the Delta Quadrant in an uncrewed test flight that they were checking to see if the ship worked or not. They'd set up an unmanned test flight. Something went wrong. Starfleet lost the ship. It crashes on this asteroid, Tars Lamora. Somehow the Diviner finds out about it and is looking for it. That's the piece that I don't really have much context on because we don't really know much about the Diviner other than the fact that he's looking for the Protostar. So he obviously really wants this ship, is really looking for it. And I think Captain Chakotay and this motley crew of Jason Alexander, Jamila Jamil, and Daveed Diggs are part of a Starfleet ship that actual Admiral Janeway in the flesh, has dispatched to try and find the Protostar and return it to Federation space. Our characters, they're on this prison planet. run by the diviner, they break out, they find the protostar, they escape with the protostar. And I think the story of the season is going to be one of a bit of a push and pull between the diviner who wants the protostar on one end, Captain Chakotay who wants the protostar on the other, and our intrepid crew trapped in the middle who need to navigate between what both sides want and what's ultimately right for them. And that's how I think this season's going to go. What do you think about that?
I love that theory. That is that's a great way to put that together. And as we saw in the Janeway clip that just got released today, they don't know what the Federation is. They don't know what Starfleet is. They don't know what it's about. So to them, they have no real reason to kind of just hand the protostar over because Captain Chakotay says, hey, you need to give this back to us. And I think that would fit in perfectly. Your idea here would fit in perfectly with what the Hegman brothers were saying about the themes of the show and working together and learning and understanding more. These characters don't know what Star Trek is. They don't know what Starfleet is, what the Federation is. They learn about it and its ideals. So maybe the season is Captain Chakotay convincing them over time and the other crew, like, hey, we're not the bad guys. We're here to help. You can trust us. And maybe them learning to trust, but also learning to work together. So I love that theory, Alex. That's great.
Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, or Prodigy that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek or email them to me at weeklytrek@thetricordertransmissions.com, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Patrick Escudero, for joining me today. Patrick, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
Always happy to talk Trek and other things over on Twitter at PatrickE34.
And you can find this show on Twitter at Weekly Trek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Patrick. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.